All right, man, peace. So for those of you brothers that remember, just prior to last year's Super Bowl, when the New England Patriots were going to square off against the Philadelphia Eagles, the mainstream liberal sports media was trying to play up this Michael Jordan versus Tom Brady rivalry, this brawl for it all, where supposedly Tom Brady was going to be challenging Michael Jordan for supremacy when it comes to who is the greatest team sports athlete in the history of modern American sports. I even did a video about it, and had Tom Brady been able to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles last year, he certainly would have entered into the pantheon with Jordan and Bill Russell, so on and so forth, last season. Well, he was finally able to accomplish it this season. So yes, he is on that same floor with Michael Jordan and Bill Russell, and he does deserve that placement. But has he overcome Michael Jordan as the greatest team sports athlete in the history of modern American team sports? Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to First Take. We're coming to you live from above the Heineken River Deck here at Pier 17. Last night, Teflon Tom strengthened the argument for greatest of all time, certainly, obviously, among NFL players. So now the question...
No, I think that what quote-unquote Teflon Tom did, and I'm not quite sure if you want to use that nickname for someone who's been involved in as many sports controversies as Tom Brady has been involved in, I would say that what Tom Brady has done is he's strengthened his stranglehold on being considered the greatest quarterback in the history of the NFL. And for some people, such as myself, I still would take Joe Montana over Tom Brady. I think that Tom Brady is a phenomenal quarterback. I think that he's somebody who has exhausted every gift, every talent that he's been given. But if we were to compare him to Joe Montana was far more mobile, far more coordinated, had a better arm, and was more accurate. And on top of that, he played in a tougher era. If Joe Montana were playing in this era today, he'd be throwing for 45 touchdowns, 5 interceptions every season. Every season. Like, Joe Montana was levels above the Tom Brady of right now. Now, I would say Tom Brady at his best was that 2007 Tom Brady. And a couple of years ago, he also had a great season. Tom Brady is an awesome quarterback. And would I consider him arguably the best quarterback ever? Of course. When you look at his achievements, he certainly is there in the conversation. And if you're a Tom Brady fan, you're going to say it's not even close. Now, we're going to compare him to Michael Jordan. It's very difficult to make those cross-sports comparisons because, once again, Tom Brady does not have to play defense. Michael Jordan had to play both offense and defense. But let's let them continue.
The question has to be asked, is Brady the greatest athlete of any sport? Here's Brady and Edelman after the game.
I think that the better term would be the greatest sports participant. When you start using terms like the greatest athlete, now the connotation is running, jumping, hand-eye coordination, etc. So people are going to think about those things, and they're going to not give him the appropriate consideration.
Courtyard D played their tails off. That was the best game they played all year, and it was unbelievable. I might. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
He's going to chug an avocado beer.
He's a GOAT. I mean, he's got the same number as Jordan now.
Let me say this. Julian Edelman made a comment about Tom Brady after they won their 5th Super Bowl. He said that he had to put him above Montana. He made a great argument. He said, I have to put him above Montana because this is the era of free agency and so many players change over now. And you do have to give Tom Brady that amount of credit. He basically had been competing for Super Bowls with 3 different teams. I mean, you had the first team, that era with McGinnis and Ty Law. Then you had that second era team with Wes Welker and Randy Moss and those guys. And now you got this team with Edelman and Gronkowski. So he's gone through 3 different generations of football teams and been competing for championships. So that is definitely a check mark for him over Montana. No doubt about it. But I could also come back and say for Joe Montana that he was able to win with 2 separate generations of players. The only thing is that some of the defensive players were there for the duration. Like Ronnie Lott was there almost for the whole way. But the early Montana teams had players like Freddie Solomon and Dwight Clark. And then the later teams had players like John Taylor, Jerry Rice, Brent Jones, Roger Craig, etc., Charles Haley, so on and so forth. So teams do change, but the changeover on Brady's teams is far more drastic than the ones on Joe Montana's teams.
Funny you should mention that, Jules. So let's compare Tom Terrific with Michael Jordan. Both Brady and Jordan led their teams to 6 championships. Brady has 14 Pro Bowl selections, which equals MJ's 14 All-Star teams and 5.
Now, the reason why Jordan missed that one All-Star team, because of course we see he had 14 All-Star game appearances in 15 seasons, is because one year he broke his foot.
Finally, Brady trails Jordan in the MVP category, 5 and 3. Look who's here.
Good morning.
In the house.
Good
morning. Good to see you.
What's up?
I feel like I need to start with Max on this one. Max, is it fair to compare Tom Brady and Michael Jordan?
Let me say this very quickly because we all pretty much know what Max Kellerman is going to say. He is a quote-unquote Tom Brady hater. He's starting to enjoy this persona and the attention that he's getting from the Patriots and being known as one of Tom Brady's most virulent haters. He's going to say, of course, there should not be a serious discussion on whether or not Tom Brady has surpassed Michael Jordan. But yes, there does deserve to be a discussion about this. It's just that in summation, the answer is no. Because if we're going to talk about who has had the greater impact on their team and in their sport, once again, Jordan plays both offense and defense. Not only does he play both offense and defense, but he was arguably the best offensive player and defensive player in his sport at one time. From 1987 to about 1991-92, you could argue that Jordan was the best defensive player in basketball. I would give it overall to Hakeem Olajuwon, but you could argue that Jordan was arguably the best defensive player in basketball when you look at many of the metrics, the fact that he led the league in steals, his defensive win shares, so on and so forth. Offensively, it's not even a question that he was the best offensive player. That's why it's so difficult to make these cross-sport comparisons. Tom Brady arguably was not even the best quarterback in his sport for a long period of time. For a long period of time, there was a stretch where Peyton Manning was considered the better, at least regular season quarterback. People often forget that in the overall comparison between Tom Brady and Peyton Manning, the narrative was that Peyton Manning was the better regular season quarterback, while Tom Brady had the better coach and the better defense, and he was able to come up with the bigger, more clutch plays in the playoffs. That was the narrative all throughout the 2000s. Then when you got to about 2009, 2010, Aaron Rodgers rose to prominence, and he was thereafter considered arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. Jordan, from about 87 to 98, was pretty unquestioned in his supremacy on how he was viewed in contrast to the other players in the NBA. Now, sometimes a Charles Barkley or a Magic Johnson or Karl Malone will get the MVP, but they were never considered better than Michael, not by 1990 or 91 or 93. They just were not. Or 97, which is the year that Karl Malone won the MVP. So it's just different.
No, it's absurd. It's absurd. Look, I understand the best ever who ever played a sport will get compared to the best ever who ever played any other sport.
The issue is that Tom Brady is not the best ever football player. He's just starting to be lavish with that title because people are looking back over the course of 20 years. But how often over the course of those 20 years did people say without a doubt Tom Brady was even the best quarterback, much less the best football player?
But this is ridiculous. Look, Tom Brady is the greatest of all time because it's like as though Hank Aaron, the home run champ, who did it by hitting 40, 45 home runs a year every year, basically for 20-something years.
Agreed. I agree with the comparison completely. Even before he finishes, I believe that I made the same metaphor or the same analogy about Tom Brady in another video.
Was managed by like Casey Stengel or some great manager for a great team, so he also won a bunch of championships. Tom Brady, at various points in his career, looked like the best player in football, here and there. But it wasn't like throughout his whole career we were like, that's the best guy in the league. We thought that because he was very, very good in the regular season, and he was not a choker in the postseason. And as his career went along, he became better and better under pressure till he actually elevated in the postseason. But many years of his career, the consensus was Peyton Manning was better, till it mattered most. Many years of his career, people with eyeballs know that Aaron Rodgers is better. Brady never gave you the sense that you were looking at Babe Ruth or Michael Jordan. The reason Babe Ruth's considered the greatest baseball player of all time is because he was lapping the league when he hit 6.
Well, I have to stop you there. Babe Ruth is not considered the greatest baseball player of all time. I think that he's considered the player who was the farthest ahead of his time. Number one, Babe Ruth did not play against the best competition. Babe Ruth's era was basically the best Caucasian players east of the Mississippi. it was very rare that there were even Major League Baseball players who came from the West Coast back in Babe Ruth's era. The reason why the Yankees were able to grab Joe DiMaggio is because he was from the Bay Area, and they had the money in their scouting department to go all the way out there to scout Joe DiMaggio. I believe Yogi Berra was from the St. Louis area, and they were able to scout him as well. But once again, until Jackie Robinson came into Major League Baseball in 1947, there were no black baseball players in Major League Baseball in the modern era. There were black baseball players in Major League Baseball in the 1800s, but they stopped them from allowing to participate into the 1900s. When Jackie Robinson came into the major leagues in 1947, that started a wave. You also had Larry Doby and Willie Mays, and of course Hank Aaron and Ernie Banks, Roberto Clemente, so on and so forth. Frank Robinson started to flood the league with great quote-unquote black talent. Right now, Major League Baseball is far more diverse than it ever was. You have the best players on the planet Earth in Major League Baseball right now. So I can't call Babe Ruth the greatest baseball player of all time because he did not play against the greatest competition.
60 home runs. No other American League team hit 60 home runs. He did it by himself. And he was like the greatest left-handed pressure pitcher of all time. When Michael Jordan, the reason he's considered the greatest ever is because, first of all, your eyeballs when they were on him was like, oh, that guy's different. But also, yeah, he's 6-0 in championships. But also, yeah, the 5 MVPs, but we all know why those other 5 MVPs through the 10 years of his career, his real career, weren't given to Jordan. Those were sympathy MVPs to spread around the league. Jordan's really a 10-time MVP.
Well, not quite. In 89 and 90, Magic Johnson deserved those MVPs. In 1989 and 1990, Magic Johnson deserved those MVPs. You could actually make a case that in 89, Isaiah Thomas should have gotten that MVP. But from 91 to 98, Jordan probably deserved all those MVPs that he got, as well as 1 or 2 that he didn't get. But he was not robbed of too many MVPs. To quote Rachel Nichols, if you would have had an award for the best player in the NBA, then yes, he would have received that award every year. But the most valuable player, Barkley deserved it in 93 because his team won the most games. Malone, that one's a little dicey in 97 because the Bulls actually won more games than the Jazz, but Malone had a higher player efficiency rating than Jordan had. So I had no problem with that one as well.
MVP. So Tom Brady is the greatest football player of all time. He is the greatest quarterback of all time.
Well, that's according to you. The greatest football player of all time, in my view, is Jerry Rice. Greatest quarterback is Joe Montana. But I can understand you having Brady as that guy on both those lists.
Career accomplishment, the whole thing. But that does not make you the Michael Jordan of football.
Well, listen. I'm certainly not going to sit up here and tell you that Tom Brady's the greatest athlete of all time.
That's why I state that word is very dangerous, because the word athlete has a lot of connotations to it. I believe that for a better and a cleaner debate, they should have changed the verbiage. It should be, who's the greatest sports participant in modern team sports history? Or who's the greater sports participant? Is it Michael Jordan or Tom Brady?
Obviously, I disagree with that. I totally agree with you. But I do think that, you got to take into account the position that he's playing, what's required of him, and what he has delivered in comparison to his contemporaries. And that's what we have to look at. They play 2 different sports. Michael Jordan couldn't do what he did on the NFL level because Michael Jordan could go out there and play lights out just like Tom Brady does, but your defense stinks up the joint and they can't get it done. But in the sport of basketball, even though you can't play defense before other guys, the fact of the matter is one individual can have profoundly more of an impact on the outcome of competition on the basketball court than necessarily is the case on the football field. Michael Jordan could shoot a jump shot. Michael Jordan could dunk on somebody. Michael Jordan could get to the free throw line. Tom Brady can't catch passes for his receivers. He can't run the football for his running backs. He can't block for himself. So when you look at it from that perspective, I just think we're talking about 2 different sports, and which is why I'll sit up here and give Tom Brady the respect that he's due in this regard. In clutch situations, is Tom Brady tantamount to a Michael Jordan, meaning somebody who has the ability and has displayed the ability to close, to finish the job and get it done? That answer would be yes. He ain't the athlete that Michael Jordan was Clearly, he's not undefeated in championship competition the way that it is. But on many, many occasions, when Tom Brady has been given the ball with crunch time arriving and an outcome on the line, particularly in the championship, 5 of his 6 Super Bowl championships have come on game-winning drives that Tom Brady himself has orchestrated and finished off. That is like the Michael Jordan of your respective sport. So no, he's not the better athlete per se. We're certainly not going to call him the GOAT in that regard. But as it pertains to what he brings to the table, based on his position, mentioning Tom Brady in the same breath as Michael Jordan is warranted.
Absolutely. In other words, Stephen A. Smith agrees with my take that they're in the same room. They're on the same floor. They're within the same pantheon, no doubt about it.
It is absolutely fair to compare Tom Brady and Michael Jordan. Let's do this, and Stephen A., you started the process. Let's set aside the word athlete. People get hung up on that word.
Agreed.
It seems to imply who could go into the other sport and dominate. Obviously, Tom Brady isn't the athlete that Michael Jordan is, and he laughs at that notion. He laughed at it a week or two ago when it was brought up in regards to LeBron James. Is it fair to compare them as GOATs? And the answer is absolutely yes. Is this conversation fair? Is this question, is this debate fair? The answer is yes. Now, Max, I want you to listen to me here because I think that you have dug yourself so deep into this anti-Tom Brady hole. And believe me,
I'm the greatest of all time. That's anti-Tom Brady.
We know what you do. We know the scroll you want to run at the bottom when you talk about Tom Brady. But
hey, yo, Will Kane always wants smoke with Max Kellerman, man. This dude stay looking for smoke with that boy.
But you've dug your hole so deep that you're throwing dirt on yourself. You caveat everything. Everything.
I agree with that. Kellerman's always trying to give some lame caveat before he goes in on Tom Brady. Yes, Tom Brady, he's the GOAT. He's the greatest quarterback of all time. But let me tell you how much he sucks.
He does. You're now caveating 6 Super Bowls. I saw your tweets because I follow you. I saw your tweets. Oh, was he playing defense?
By the way, don't characterize what I say. Just make your point.
I am. Listen and see if you can keep up.
You're mischaracterizing my.
No, I don't. Listen, here's the key, Max. The problem for you, Max, is I listen to you.
I'm right here. You don't have to yell. I'm sitting right next to you.
I'm aware of your physical presence as well.
Oh my God.
Maybe not.
Listen to this, Max.
Max Kellerman said maybe not. When Will Kane said that I'm aware of your physical presence, in other words, Max Kellerman is telling him we can take this outside if that's really what you want.
I'm here too.
I don't even need to debate you, Max. You don't keep yourself straight on this stuff. You talk about the coach, you talk about the defense, you talk about the running game, you caveat everything, including 6 Super Bowls. And then just now, listening to you, because this is the key in a debate, listening to you talking about 6-3, Michael Jordan 6-0. I've heard you.
I didn't say that just now, but go ahead.
If I round this tape back 30
I didn't say
seconds,
6-3. I said Michael Jordan 6-0 in championship.
You just said
Right, but what's implied when you say that Michael Jordan is 6-0? What's implied is that what he did was greater than Tom Brady because Tom Brady is 6-3. So let's not try to beat around the bush, Max Kellerman. Let's not be disingenuous. When it comes to that comparison between 6-0 and 6-3, in my view, the better distinction is how many championships did you win in comparison to how many years you played, as opposed to being concerned with how many championships you won in contrast to how many championships you lost. So in other words, Jordan won 6 championships in 15 years, really 6 championships in 13 years because he came back with the Wizards because he thought that he would have the opportunity to own the team. Tom Brady has won 6 championships in 20 years. So that's what makes Jordan's accomplishments more potent.
You said Michael Jordan 6-0.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I didn't mishear you there.
No, I didn't say anything about Brady being 6-3.
Cool, because when you bring up LeBron James, you talk about how absurd it would be for somebody to go 5-3 or 3-5 and discount them for their appearances when they don't win because you have to win to get there.
Thank you, sir, for bringing up the LeBron James superfan and how they try to change their argument. Oftentimes, LeBron James superfans also don't like Tom Brady if you pay attention. Max Kellerman, Shannon Sharp, they don't like Tom Brady. They love LeBron James. They tell you about how LeBron James deserves all this credit for getting to the finals, but then they'll try to tear down Tom Brady for getting to the Super Bowl and losing. I would never say, well, Joe Montana is above Tom Brady because Joe Montana is 4-0 and Tom Brady's 6-3. I would say that as long as Tom Brady was tied with Joe Montana in Super Bowl victories, that we also had to consider the fact that he lost in the Super Bowl. Now that he surpassed Joe Montana, to me, that's not an argument anymore. So all I look at is the eye test. I look at time period in which they played, the type of defenses that they were forced to go against, things of that nature. To be quite frank with you, it's just a personal preference that I would take Joe Montana over Tom Brady, because it's very clear that Tom Brady has surpassed Joe in accomplishments.
You're comparing Jordan. You brought up Jordan 6-0 because you're using his undefeated performance against Tom Brady to say it's ridiculous to compare them.
No, not quite. That's not really what Max Kellerman stated. What he stated is that the reason why he would take Michael Jordan over Tom Brady is because Michael Jordan was far more dominant in his sport than Tom Brady was in his sport. So you started off well by highlighting the fact that Max Kellerman tried to throw a little quote-unquote shade on Tom Brady for losing 3 Super Bowls, but now you're digressing into an avenue that's not really relevant and was not stated.
I understand what you're doing. Don't sit here and throw more dirt on yourself. It is absolutely fair to compare this. It is 100%.
So make your case in the you still haven't made your case in the affirmative. Look, the fact is, if you look at Michael Jordan's resume, you will never find a Game 7 in the finals where he had the equivalent of a 25 QBR. It just wouldn't happen. Tom Brady's in the conversation because he's performed at a very high level and he's clutch. He's playing for the greatest coach of all time. And longevity. He's done it for so long.
Great.
Michael Jordan, that's the kind of argument people make for Kareem in basketball, for Hank Aaron or Willie Mays in
I agree. Good point, sir.
In baseball. Michael Jordan is a different category. They're talking about, yes, he did it for 10 years, which is a long enough prime, but his peak performance was also qualitatively different from everyone else. You will win.
In other words, what Max Kellerman is trying to say is that Michael Jordan is in the realm with Sugar Ray Robinson, and as he would put it, Babe Ruth, players who were so far and above and ahead of everybody else in his era that it's difficult to have a comparison with somebody else. So I suspect that that is how Max Kellerman would try to argue if someone were to bring up that Barry Bonds was better than Babe Ruth, or Willie Mays or Hank Aaron were better than Babe Ruth. He would respond by saying, well, qualitatively, Babe Ruth was so far ahead of his competition. My issue with that is that, once again, Babe Ruth did not play against the best competition on the planet, or even in the United States.
Tom Brady's peak. You will win debates that don't exist.
Tom Brady's peak. Well, you have to define what you mean by greatness.
Well, I'm going to show you something. You know that scroll you wanted to run to caveat your Brady performance? Look at the bottom of the scroll on this one. Read me the question.
Fair to compare Brady and Michael Jordan.
Thank you. You're making an argument that Jordan is the greatest of all time.
Right.
No one here is debating that. Stephen A. didn't. I didn't. I think Michael Jordan is the greatest athlete of all time. Does that mean I think it's unfair to compare them? No. I think it's close.
Brady's not in.
Well, that's the best response that you've given thus far, Will Kane. But we have to ask ourselves a question. Is it truly relevant to ask a question that we already know the answer to? It's like saying, is it okay to compare this and that when we already know that that is far superior to this, or is superior to this? Let me not say far superior. It's superior, it's discernibly superior. Is it really relevant to ask a question that we definitively know the answer to?
It's close. Brady's not in Jordan's category. Jordan, for 10 straight years, was by so much the best player in his sport, it was ridiculous to compare anyone.
You think
Brady's never been that.
I think Michael Jordan wins this debate.
Right.
I recognize that it is a debate. You act like it isn't one.
No.
And because you do the same tricks that you always do, you caveat everything Tom Brady's accomplished in his entire career.
Why are you worried about characterizing my argument? Make your argument.
I'm telling you Tom Brady is in the conversation. I have made the argument.
No, you haven't. How? Why is he in the
9
conversation?
Super Bowl appearances, 6 victories, more than anybody. 9 appearances, the next closest is 6.
We just saw everyone acknowledges this year is about Belichick. He's playing for Belichick. Was Michael Jordan about Phil Jackson? That's the
Guys.
Well, let me say this. In the comparison of Michael Jordan and Phil Jackson to Tom Brady and Bill Belichick, Michael Jordan never saw the success without Phil Jackson that he saw with Phil Jackson. But he was able to reach an Eastern Conference Finals the year before Phil Jackson took over. It's difficult to contrast because Brady has never played without Belichick, so who knows how good he would be without Belichick. Maybe Brady himself was telling you how he thought he would fare without Belichick when he went up to the owner's box and told Bob Kraft, do not allow Bill Belichick to trade me. Maybe he knows something within his heart that he's not going to be as good without Belichick. Who knows?
Guys. I know everybody's very emotional right now. Everyone just looks
Emotional?
Women love using that word around men because they know that it's a trigger word. I would say that they're both passionate. I wouldn't say emotional.
You're a little emotional. Yeah, Stephen A. you're falling back. I'm enjoying it. I'm having a great time. Everyone at home is too. So let's take a commercial break because I need more of this in my life.
Okay, so now we're back. When we left off, Will Kane and Max Kellerman were going at it pretty much over both participants trying to use straw man arguments to make the other person's argument seem invalid, when in reality, there's really not much to argue about. They're both in the same room. It's just that Jordan's at the front of the line. Brady would be somewhere in the middle of the line. But that level that they're on, there are very few athletes on that level. We're talking about Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Kareem, Tom Brady, Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle. I mean, if we're just going to talk about great athletes who are also great winners, that's the level that they're on. But Jordan is discernibly ahead of Tom Brady for the simple fact that he was able not only to dominate on the offensive end, also on the defensive end. He was far more proficient. He was clearly above his contemporaries. Tom Brady, I would never say was clearly above his contemporaries in the 2000s. I think that since 2015 is where Tom Brady has really started to stand out above and beyond everybody else in the NFL. And not really until then. And that truly is what is the most tremendous aspect of him, is that he's played some of his best football after the age of 35.